Dozens of protesters decided to take their voices to the Aurora neighborhood of a local ICE warden. They held signs, banged on drums, and used megaphones calling on the warden to resign because of the conditions and management of the detention facility in Aurora. Welcome, everyone, to Politics Unplugged. I'm Anne Trujillo. And that rally coming on the heels of a new report from the ACLU claiming ICE is violating basic human rights at the GEO facility in Aurora. In the report, the ACLU details cases of abuse, neglect, even the deaths of 2 people inside that detention facility. And here's some specifics. The ACLU claims that detainees were not given proper doses of medications, if at all. There are claims that bed sores were so bad one detainee had to get his leg amputated. The report also details a botched tooth extraction and even claims that a detainee was forced into confusion and isolation after not getting proper hearing aids. In another case, a detainee's fingers were broken after being slammed in a cell door by a guard. Now, ICE says this facility is humane, clean, and a professionally run detention center that was recently inspected. And they add, any fatality in ICE custody is tragic, and our staff takes all efforts to prevent fatalities. Of course, protests are not new when it comes to ICE, specifically the GEO facility in Aurora, and coming under fire for separating families and not properly caring for detainees. And while groups continue to push for the end of ICE, others say the agency is misunderstood. Protesters say the group is inhumane, needs to be done away with. ICE says it's simply following the law, and one former Border Patrol agent tells people they don't understand the job is dangerous and difficult.
Over 85% of those that we target and arrest have been convicted of a crime or have been charged with a crime.
The majority of the people in that facility are not criminals.
It's important for me to talk about my father, who was picked up by ICE, detained for 2 weeks, and then he died in their care.
And we know a lot of you are talking about this, particularly on social media. One viewer wrote in to say ICE has a dangerous but necessary job to do. They're being called names for enforcing the laws. And another telling us, close it down by any means necessary. Well, Denise Maes of the ACLU is joining us here to talk more about the report, these allegations. You went there, you saw it firsthand.
Yes.
What did you see there?
Well, I mean, I think the facility itself, one of the comments that I made about it was it's a very prison-like facility, even though the majority of individuals there are not, have not been tried and for any type of criminal conduct except for standing at the border. So people there are largely kept in for civil custody purposes and not criminal custody purposes. And so I find that a little ironic that they're being kept in prison-like conditions even though they have not committed a crime.
Because we heard the ICE administrators say that 85% of people they detain are detained for criminal purposes.
They are detained, 85% of those in the Aurora detention facility are asylum seekers. They were picked up at the border and brought to the facility in Aurora.
So where do you think this disconnect is happening? I mean, clearly people are very divided on this issue. So where is the disconnect? Help us find
well, I think on some level, and look, I mean, I think ICE agents they claim that they're just doing their job, and that's probably true in the sense that that's what they've been told to do. I think our immigration system is broken. I think the way that we are deciding to address that issue now is even more broke, and picking up people who are seeking asylum, running away from their from their home country where they were treated poorly, where they're trying to escape violence, and then picking them up at the border and then further traumatizing them by putting them in prison-like facilities is not the answer.
Because where is the law here? What are we missing about the pieces of the law that would allow for something like that to happen when someone's seeking asylum?
Well, I think what has always been done historically is that those individuals would be allowed to come in to the border, apply for asylum, and then wait for their case to be called. What is happening now instead is they are being picked up at the border and sent to a detention facility where there are many individuals there that have been there for years, 2 years, 3 years.
Really?
And yes, and they have no idea of the status of their case. That is, they cannot properly care for their case while they are detained in that facility.
And how is that possible that they don't know I'm sure I'm asking very naive questions here, but
No,
how is it that they do not know the status of the case?
I mean, we wonder that too, but it's basically the backlog in the system. If you decide to put an enforcement machine on steroids and pick up any sort of individual here in violation of the immigration laws, picking up asylum seekers at the border, you're going to have a flooded system. And that's essentially what's happening.
So you said this was a prison-like system. What does that mean when you say that? What specifically did you say?
People are only allowed a certain amount of time outdoors, and I say outdoors in quotes because really what they're allowed to do is go to a recreation area, which is a brick wall with on top there's a little wire covering so that there's some sunlight. So they're not allowed to go outside of that facility. They aren't allowed contact visits with family and friends. It's all done through a thick glass window over a telephone. They are allowed out of their pod at certain times to get their food. They're not, and then they're just relegated to their area all other times.
And you talked about the food as well, that it was not edible?
Correct. I mean, there were those recurring complaints about how terrible the food is. And there were many of the detainees that were convinced that the only reason why they were getting good food that day is because I was there. And listen, a lot of these things are hard to verify on either side. The problem with having a facility like this run by a private entity is that they are not subject to the same accountability and transparency as a government-run institution.
Yet they're getting taxpayer money.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, as residents, as taxpayers,
we should demand more accountability and transparency. One of the things that the ACLU is trying to champion is to create some state oversight so that perhaps there could be some legislation passed where some government agency, a state government agency, whether it be the Colorado Department of Health, the Attorney General's office, the Governor's office, can go into that facility on a regular basis, conduct an audit, conduct an inspection, and report out so that we, as at least state taxpayers, know what's happening in that facility.
Yeah, because we hear so many times from people, they're here illegally. It's a non-issue.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about our Constitution is that it is applicable to all individuals, even those that may be here in violation of the immigration laws. And look, you know, when individuals commit an infraction, there is a judicial process that cares for them. Housing them in these types of for-profit facilities is not one of the answers we see as important.
Denise Maes from the ACLU, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
Back in a moment.